My family has always had a word for what I do. Not the right word, not a true word, but a word they've stuck with for 15 years with the kind of stubborn loyalty usually reserved for hockey teams and questionable casseroles. The word is clinic, as in Miriam works at the clinic, as in she's doing something with medicine, you know how she is, as in a place you go to get a flu shot and come back next year for the same flu shot. They don't know about the nights. They don't know about operating room 4 on a February morning at 2 a.m. when the temperature outside has dropped to -28 and a kid, 19 years old, maybe 20, comes through the bay doors with a traumatic aortic tear from a highway collision on the 417. They don't know what it looks like when you open someone up and feel the blood pressure dropping under your hands, and you know with a clarity that is almost peaceful that you are the only margin between this person going home and this person never going anywhere again. They don't know any of that. To my family, I work at the clinic. The Sunday dinners at my parents' house in Orléans always start the same way. I take the 417 East, past the IKEA, past the park and ride lots that are perpetually half full, and I watch the city flatten out into the kind of suburb that has a Tim Hortons on every corner and a Costco everyone drives 40 minutes to reach. The drive is 25 minutes. It feels longer. It always feels long. My mother meets me at the door in the way only Canadian mothers meet their children, all warmth and mild accusation, simultaneously. You look thin. Did you eat? Your Uncle Roger is already here. He's in the living room. Don't argue with him. She takes my coat before I've fully stepped out of it. My Uncle Roger was with the RCMP for 30 years. He retired as a senior superintendent, which in his own estimation means he essentially ran federal policing in Eastern Ontario. He golfs 3 times a week. He sits on the board of the Ottawa General Hospital Foundation, which he will tell you about within approximately 4 minutes of any conversation. He has opinions about everything, and he has the specific energy of a man who has never once been wrong in his own mind and sees absolutely no reason to start now. He was already on his second scotch when I came in. There she is, he called out from the armchair he had commandeered from my father, who was sitting on the couch looking carefully neutral, the way he always does when my uncle is in the room. The working girl. How's the clinic? It's a trauma center, I said, hanging my scarf on the hook by the door. Trauma center, clinic, same difference. You're not out in the field. He said it like a compliment, like I should be grateful for the distinction. I was talking to Dr. Svensson last week, by the way. You know who Dr. Svensson is? I knew exactly who Dr. Svensson was. Anders Svensson was the president and CEO of the Southeastern Ontario Health Network, which administered 4 hospitals including Ottawa General and the Level 1 Trauma Center, where I had worked for the past 6 years as an attending trauma surgeon and, for the last 14 months, as team lead of the acute trauma surgery unit. I knew Dr. Svensson because I had presented to his executive committee twice in the past year. I knew him because my department's funding requests went across his desk with my name on them. I've heard of him, I said instead. Good man. Old school. We golfed together at the Rideau Hunt Club. My Uncle Roger said this the way people announce they summer in the Muskokas, not as information, but as a credential. He'll be at the Hospital Foundation Gala next weekend. Black tie at the Fairmont Chateau Laurier. Very big deal. I told him I have a niece in medicine who's still finding her footing. He said he'd be happy to meet you. Give you some guidance. Maybe open a door or two. He tapped the side of his nose. It's not what you know. Never was. My mother appeared from the kitchen with a bowl of roasted potatoes. That's so generous, Roger. She never networks. I keep telling her, medicine is a relationship business. It's also a surgery business, I said quietly. No one seemed to hear me. Your cousin Andrew just made senior partner at his firm, my mother continued. He's 31, you're the same age. I'm just saying. I looked at the potatoes. Andrew's firm in Toronto handled commercial real estate disputes. Andrew had never stood in a waiting room and told a family the thing that cannot be taken back. Andrew slept through the night. I didn't begrudge him any of that. But the comparison had the familiar shape of a bruise I'd been pressing for a long time. I'll come to the gala, I said. My Uncle Roger beamed like he'd just done me a favor that would take years to repay. Good girl. I'll sort out your invitation. Just don't embarrass me in front of Svensson. He's the kind of man who notices things. I pressed my fork against the side of a potato, hard enough that the edge of it bit into my finger. Cold, definite, grounding. Have you ever sat at a table where the people who were supposed to know you the best saw someone completely different from who you actually were? If you know that feeling, stay with me. This story is for you. That sensation of cold metal pulled me backward the way certain things do, not with any warning, just suddenly. It dragged me 16 years back to the Convocation Auditorium at the University of Ottawa, the day I graduated with my MD. The hall was full of families with flowers and homemade signs, and the particular noise of people who have been proud for a very long time and are finally allowed to show it. I was in the queue of graduates in my regalia, scanning the rows of seats, and I found my parents near the middle. Beside them was an empty seat where my Uncle Roger was supposed to be. He hadn't come. A scheduling conflict, he'd said when he called that morning. Something with the Golf Association. He said it the way you cancel a dentist appointment. Already moving on to the next sentence before the words had landed. My parents left after the ceremony. There was a dinner that night for the graduates at the faculty club, and I had hoped they would stay. My father said he had an early start. My mother said they'd celebrate properly at Christmas. I ate with the partners of classmates I barely knew, smiling until my face ached. A week later, a card arrived at the apartment I was subletting near the hospital where I'd matched for residency. My Uncle Roger's handwriting on the envelope, that aggressive, slanted print of a man who had signed many official documents and wanted you to know it. I remember the stupid, hopeful feeling of holding that envelope, because he was ex-RCMP, because he understood institutions, because I thought maybe he finally gets it. Inside was a drugstore card, a cartoon graduation owl on the front. Inside, in that same angular print, "Congrats on the MD, kiddo. Residency is where the real work starts. Don't let it get to you. Not everyone is cut out for the pressure. Uncle Roger." Paper clipped to the card was a $20 Starbucks gift card. Not everyone is cut out for the pressure. I had just matched into one of the most competitive surgical residency programs in the country. I had survived 7 years of post-secondary education, 2 research publications, and 4 years of sleeping 4 hours a night. I had taken an oath, and he sent me a coffee gift card and a quiet suggestion that I might not make it. I kept that card in the drawer of my nightstand through 5 years of residency and a fellowship in trauma surgery. I looked at it on the worst nights, not to inspire me, to make myself angry enough to get back up. The fork, the table. My Uncle Roger explaining to my father why the federal government had mismanaged the Rideau Canal maintenance contracts. I released the fork. I picked up my wine glass. I looked at him across the table and thought, he has no idea what's waiting for him. The week before the gala, my uncle texted me twice. Tuesday. Confirmed your spot. Svensson will be there. Wear the navy dress you had on at Mom's anniversary dinner. You looked less severe. Don't bring up salaries. People don't like that. Thursday. Also, might want to Google what the health network actually does. Svensson likes people who've done their homework. Just a tip. I set the phone face down on my desk. My desk, which was in the trauma surgery department offices on the 5th floor of Ottawa General. On it were 3 grant applications I was reviewing, a stack of presentations from my residents, and a framed letter from the Department of Surgery notifying me of my appointment as INERP's Chief of Acute Trauma Surgery, pending board ratification in the spring. My colleague Felicity knocked on my open door and leaned against the frame. She was 2 years ahead of me in seniority, vascular surgery, and she had the specific energy of someone who has seen every variety of hospital politics and is no longer surprised by any of it. "You've got that face," she said. My uncle texted me advice about how to talk to Dr. Svensson at the gala. She was quiet for a moment. "Does he know you're receiving the Surgical Leadership Commendation at the gala?" "He does not." She considered this. "Are you going to tell him?" "I am not." Felicity nodded slowly, in the way you nod when a situation is arranging itself exactly as it should and you don't want to disturb it. "I'll see you Saturday." The Surgical Leadership Commendation was awarded annually by the Ottawa General Hospital Foundation to a physician who had demonstrated outstanding contribution to trauma and emergency care. I had been told in September. I had told no one outside the hospital because the announcement was meant to be made at the gala and because I hadn't figured out how to tell my family. Every version of the conversation ended with my mother saying, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your cousin Andrew just made senior partner." Saturday night in Ottawa in November is cold, the way Ottawa is always cold, not dramatically, just constantly, with a wind off the Rideau River that finds every gap in your coat. I parked at the Chateau Lauriers and sat in the car for a moment with the heat still running. I was not afraid. I want to be clear about that because fear would make a more sympathetic story, but accuracy matters more to me than sentiment. What I felt was the controlled stillness that comes before a complicated case. Everything narrowed down, no excess, only what needs to happen next. I reached into my bag and clipped my hospital badge onto my coat lapel, not because the event required it, because I wanted it there, because my Uncle Roger had spent 15 years deciding what I was, and tonight I was going to let the badge speak before I said a word. I got out of the car. The Chateau Laurier in November is the kind of building that reminds you, Ottawa is not simply a place where government paperwork is processed. The limestone exterior, the copper roofline, the lobby with its high ceilings and chandelier light, it was built to make people feel small in a formal, respectful way. The ballroom was already full. 200 people in black tie and cocktail dresses, the low roar of conversation over a jazz quartet in the corner. Silver and blue decor, the Hospital Foundation's logo placed tastefully near the stage. I spotted my Uncle Roger before he spotted me. He was standing near the bar with two men in suits, gesturing with his scotch in the particular way that means he is explaining something important about himself. My mother was beside him in her good blouse. My father stood slightly behind her, studying a framed photograph on the wall. And next to them, talking to my uncle with the polite attention of a man who has attended 1,000 of these events, was Dr. Anders Svensson. I walked toward them. There she is. My uncle turned and spread his arms in that welcoming, performing gesture. "Dr. Svensson, this is my niece, Miriam. She's in medicine, still building her career, finding the right doors. You know how it is. I've been telling her you'd be the perfect person to give her some direction." He put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Maybe point her toward the right people in the department. I've put in a word, of course. That's what family's for." Dr. Anders Svensson turned to look at me. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of face that has spent a long time making difficult decisions and settled into something quietly precise. His eyes went to the badge on my lapel. The badge that read Ottawa General Hospital in blue across the top, and below it, in clear bold text, Dr. Bovas Trauma Surgery Team Lead Aket Trauma Unit. He went very still. Not confused, recognizing. He said my name, not as a question. He said it the way you confirm something you've been hoping to verify. Dr. Beauvais. He looked at my Uncle Roger, then back at me, and the warm social composure in his face had been replaced by something more specific and more serious. "I didn't realize. Roger, this is your niece?" My uncle laughed, not understanding yet. "The very one. Like I said, she's still..." Dr. Beauvais led the team that responded to the Queensway multi-vehicle collision in March, Dr. Svensson said. His voice had the quiet, deliberate quality of someone delivering information that carries weight. 4 critical patients. Her team was in the OR for 11 hours straight. He paused for a moment. One of those patients was my brother-in-law. The room did not actually go quiet, but in the small circle of us it did. My mother stopped adjusting her bracelet. My Uncle Roger's mouth was slightly open around the laugh that hadn't finished. "He made a full recovery," Dr. Svensson continued, "and he was looking at me now, not at my uncle, not at anyone else. His wife called our office 3 times trying to find out which surgeon to thank. We couldn't release names for privacy reasons, but she knew the team lead's initial, and now I know the rest of it." He extended his hand. "I've been wanting to meet you properly." I shook it. My grip was steady. "I'm glad he recovered," I said. Dr. Beauvais. Dr. Svensson continued, addressing the circle, is also the recipient of this year's Surgical Leadership Commendation, which is one of the reasons she's a featured guest this evening. He looked at my uncle pleasantly, without edge, which was somehow worse than anything with edge would have been. I'm sure you knew that, Roger. My Uncle Roger said nothing. He looked at me, he looked at the badge, he looked back at Dr. Svensson. And in that sequence of 3 glances, I watched something leave his face that I had never seen leave it before. Not in 33 years of being his niece. The certainty went out of it, just drained away like a candle going flat. Of course, he started. I was just introducing. She doesn't need an introduction, Dr. Svensson said warmly. It was the most precise kind of correction, the kind that arrives without temperature, without anger, and is therefore impossible to argue with. She's the one keeping our trauma bay at full capacity. He turned back to me. I'd love to introduce you to the chief of surgery before the program starts. She's been following your research proposal on expanded triage protocol. She has questions. I'd like that very much, I said. I looked at my Uncle Roger one final time. He had both hands around his Scotch glass, holding it the way people hold something when they no longer know what their hands are for. He was looking at me with an expression I didn't have an exact word for. Not quite shame, something smaller and more disoriented than shame. The expression of a man realizing, at 61, that the map he's been using is for an entirely different territory. I thought about the graduation card. I thought about not everyone is cut out for the pressure in that slanted, certain handwriting. I thought about every Sunday dinner and every casually dropped word and every moment I had held my tongue and pressed the cold edge of a fork into my palm to stay steady. I didn't say any of it. A surgeon knows the difference between a necessary incision and a wound made out of anger. One heals cleanly, the other just keeps bleeding. Enjoy the evening, I said. I turned and walked with Dr. Svensson toward the far end of the ballroom. I was aware of the crowd shifting, not dramatically, but in the small, instinctive way that happens when the center of gravity in a room changes. I was aware of my father setting down his glass, and I was aware of my Uncle Roger standing in the place I had left him, very still, in a room where no one was looking at him anymore. The commendation was presented at 9 o'clock. My name was spoken clearly into a microphone in front of 200 people. There was sustained applause. I said a few words about the team, because that was the true thing to say. It was always the team. Felicity was in the 3rd row and raised her wine glass at me when I stepped off the podium. My parents were near the back, and when I found my father's face in the crowd, something in it was different. Not transformed, but different. A small, quiet shift, like a window cracked open in a room that had been closed for a very long time. If you have ever had your greatest achievement witnessed by someone who spent years treating it like nothing, if you know what that shift feels like when they finally see it, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. My Uncle Roger left before dessert was served. I noticed the empty chair without looking for it. 7 months later, I was formally appointed Chief of Acute Trauma Surgery. The announcement went through the hospital communications office. My name was in the Ottawa Citizen on a Thursday morning. Felicity brought a tart from the French bakery on Elgin Street, and my residents ate it standing up in the department lounge between cases, because that was the kind of place we were. Always between something, always ready for whatever was coming through the doors next. My Uncle Roger sent a text that afternoon. I saw it come in while I was reviewing a post-operative chart. Saw the announcement. Chief of Surgery. Wow, good for you. Your grandmother would have been proud. We should soon reconnect. Let me know what works. I put the phone down on the counter. I kept reading the chart. There was no anger in me when I thought about him. I want to be accurate about that, because anger would make a cleaner story, but accuracy is what I was trained for. What I felt instead was the particular quiet that comes at the end of a very long case, the stillness after you've closed, when the monitors are steady, when you have done everything that could be done, and you can finally release the breath you've been holding. He was not a villain. He was a man who had spent his whole life measuring worth in rank and club memberships and the right introductions, and who had looked at me and seen someone who didn't register on any of those scales. That was not cruelty so much as a failure of imagination. And you cannot stay angry at a person for being unable to imagine something larger than themselves. You can only keep moving. I opened the text. I read it once more. Then I pressed the small archive icon and watched the message disappear from my screen, filed away into the part of history that is finished and does not need to be reopened. I set the phone down. Down the hall, the trauma bay doors opened with the specific pneumatic hiss I can identify from 3 corridors away. A radio crackled. A paramedic's voice came through, clipped, precise, reading off vitals and mechanism of injury and ETA. I clipped my badge back onto my lanyard, picked up the chart, and walked toward the sound. The sky above this city is wide and cold, and it belongs to everyone who does the work. It has never once had room for the people who tried to tell me I wasn't ready for it.